Hello, everyone, and welcome to the weekly DeSmogCAST, where we clear the PR pollution that clouds climate science and shed some light on the biggest environmental stories of the week that you need to know about. I'm your host, Farron Cousins, and joining me this week, we have Carol Linnett, the Managing Editor and Director of Research for DeSmogCANADA, Mike Gorecki, contributing writer for DeSmogBlog.com, and Derek Leahy, contributing writer to DeSmogCANADA. Thank you all for joining me this week, and Mike, I want to jump right in with you. Here, California right now, huge drought taking place, fracking industry going at a fevered pitch. Oil and water don't mix, do they?
No, indeed they don't. And, in fact, when water is contaminated with oil industry wastewater, it's pretty much considered to be permanently removed from the water cycle. So, as you can imagine, we need to be really protecting the water here in California from the oil and gas industry waste stream, and unfortunately that has not been happening whatsoever, as we found out once again this past week. You might recall last year, pretty big bombshell of a story came out that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, had audited the state program that oversees injection wells and found it sorely lacking. In fact, so lacking that they suspected as many as 11 injection wells were injecting directly into aquifers protected under the Safe Drinking Water Act as well as state law. They eventually confirmed that 9 of them were injecting oil industry wastewater into these aquifers that are protected and shut them down. And now we found out that as many as 550 more injection wells might be injecting into aquifers with potentially usable water.
So, okay, right now California, like we started off saying, we discussed before we even got on today, there are very huge, very significant drought happening. And so we know that these fracking companies are injecting their wastewater directly into the aquifers with drinkable water. My biggest question here at this point is, what has been done to these companies that we know are essentially breaking the law? Has anything been done? Is there any action taking place against the companies? Virtually nothing has been done other than shutting down these injection wells. No, I've heard of no punitive measures. I don't know of any other action that they're taking. However, the EPA gave the state regulators until February 6th, actually, to come up with a plan for how they're going to fix this system. So, we should find out, hopefully soon enough, exactly what the state plans to do to really get this under control. I know a lot of really great plaintiffs' attorneys in the state of California. So my advice to anybody who's anywhere near one of these fracking wells, go ahead, call an attorney. We've seen this too many times in America. This is going to get ugly. This is going to be bad, and these fracking companies, there is absolutely no chance that they're going to do the right thing on their own. So it's going to be up to the citizens. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe for once we're going to see some actual real recompense from this company. Doubtful. So do your best, get a good attorney, and be ready for it, because I don't think for now, at least, that this problem is going to get any better. And speaking of things not getting any better, Carol, the United States still pushing so darn hard to get that Keystone XL pipeline put in place, because obviously it's going to carry some sort of magic with it that is going to fix everything that's wrong with the country. And oil prices still near about 5-6 year lows. What effect has that overall kind of had on the whole Keystone discussion, really? I mean, give us the overview of what's happening.
Well, the State Department is still considering the Keystone XL pipeline. It's still seeking input from a number of departments in the U.S., including the Environmental Protection Agency. And just this week, actually, the EPA sent a letter to the State Department saying, we might need to reconsider a few things about the Keystone XL pipeline in light of plummeting oil prices, and also the way that low oil prices will contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. And this has been a bit of a sticking point. You might recall earlier State Department reports really downplayed the greenhouse gas emission impacts of the Keystone XL pipeline, basically saying, you know, those emissions are going to be created no matter what. The pipeline shouldn't have to really be held responsible for those emissions. But of course, the EPA in their most recent letter, you know, is talking about capacity to carry oil from the Alberta oil sands to the Gulf of Mexico, and that will have tremendously high greenhouse gas emission impacts. The sort of direct impacts that they've tracked are the equivalent of adding over 5 million new passenger cars to the road, or over the 50-year lifespan of the pipeline, it's a billion more tons of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere over the next 50 years. So serious climate impacts associated with that pipeline, and they're asking Obama to take that into consideration when he makes his decision.
And so obviously the EPA in the United States has done assessments like this before, I assume. Is that correct? Is this the first one that's really kind of gotten down into the nitty-gritty of how these oil sands emissions are going to increase with the pipeline? Is this the first time we're really seeing something like that from the government body?
And this is the first time that the EPA has weighed in at this level on that particular issue, and it's been significant for a lot of people who are watching this debate, a lot of people who are actively, you know, fighting this pipeline, opponents of the pipeline, knowing that it will have tremendous climate impacts. It's been called a carbon bomb. You know, we know the discourse surrounding this, and that engaging in that level of discourse has really been resisted at the upper levels. That changed a little bit in 2013 when Obama said, you know, his decision will on Keystone will come down to whether or not it significantly exacerbates the problem of climate change. So then, of course, for proponents of the pipeline, it became, at that point, about limiting and not mentioning the climate impacts of the pipeline. So a lot of people are saying, Bill McKibben, founder of 350.org, said, you know, with this letter from the EPA, this really gives President Obama everything he needs to reject the pipeline.
Well, he's had everything he needs to know to reject the pipeline since it's been proposed, but let's hope he sticks to his word. Like he said a few weeks ago, if this pipeline, if legislation comes to my desk approving the pipeline, I will veto it. Let's hope he sticks to his word. Unfortunately, we have a very pro-oil Congress. We have a pro-oil Senate, and those guys, judging from what they've been doing for the last month, will stop at nothing to get this pipeline approved. And while we're talking about pipelines, Derek, first of all, welcome to your first DeSmogCAST. We're happy to have you here. You've been doing some great work with DeSmogCANada. You know, in the United States, 99% of the talk of any kind of pipeline is dominated by Keystone XL. But up in Canada, and even in the United States, we have, you know, countless pipelines that are already in operation, already running oil, tar sands, oil sands, everything under the sun. But there's some pretty dangerous ones up there in Canada right now that we need to be paying attention to, correct?
Definitely. Now, you guys think you got big pipelines? Looks like we're going to have one of the biggest. So the pipeline I'm talking about, it's also from TransCanada, so the same guys who are behind the Keystone XL proposal. The pipeline's called Energy East. Energy East would be about 4,600 kilometers of pipeline stretching from Alberta going all the way to New Brunswick, so the east coast of Canada. The pipeline would be able to move, if it's approved, about 1.1 million barrels of oil and oil sands oil, so the type of unconventional oil that comes from Alberta. Move about 1.1 million barrels of that type of oil every day all the way to the east coast. So that's bigger than Keystone XL. That's bigger than Northern Gateway. If this thing does go ahead, this will be Canada's biggest pipeline, and as far as I know, it would wind up being North America's biggest pipeline proposal.
And this is from TransCanada, the same people pushing the Keystone XL. And if I'm not mistaken, TransCanada really doesn't have that great of a record when it comes to pipeline safety, correct?
Yeah. Why would you bring that up? No, definitely. And there is a lot of distrust at the moment, especially in areas that
I guess you could say, don't have a heck of a lot to gain from the project. So you have provinces such as where I am in Ontario, where the pipeline just goes right through it. So the oil isn't exactly destined for refineries in Ontario, and it's going over quite a few vital watersheds in northern Ontario. And yeah, definitely there's questions, there's concerns about, well, this pipeline is quite old, and some sections of the pipeline are older than me, and I'm not exactly a spring chicken. So there's concerns about the age, concerns about the condition, and also concerns about the type of oil that's going to be going through the pipeline. It's pretty clear right now with oil sands oil, or actually what's called bitumen, when that stuff hits water, it comes into contact with water, it's not going to float on the surface, it's going to sink. We saw that at Kalamazoo. So yeah, people are definitely freaked out about that.
And you know, rightfully they should be. I mean, this most of North America is very, very far behind when it comes to the rest of the world in terms of investing in renewable energy. A few years ago, DeSmog covered that fact. And unfortunately, right now, it looks like we're still headed down that same fossil fuel path, and it's very unfortunate. Also, unfortunately, we are out of time for this week, but Mike, Carol, Derek, thank you all so much for joining us. Everybody watching this, you can find these stories and more at desmogblog.com, desmog.ca, and desmog.uk, and we will see you on next week's DeSmogCast. Thank you very much for joining us.